Thank you for joining this webinar series presented by the 2021 CSCC Annual Conference Double Diamond sponsors. Thanks to all of the CSCC sponsors as well for their continued support. And now, on to the webinar.
Thank you everyone for being here. I will be Vanna White for part of the presentation while Zoe's talking, and then talk a little bit myself. So my name is Erin Doran. I will give Zoe a chance to introduce herself, but we are representing Iowa State University. We are in the Division of Higher Education within the School of Education, and are half, or about actually 2/5 of the Community College Leadership Program. Here we are gathered in order to talk about how Iowa State works on preparing the next generation of community college practitioners within the state of Iowa. And just to highlight some of the fantastic work that is going on here in Ames. And overview, we will do some introductions. I do want to highlight some of our programmatic offerings. And then Zoe will talk a bit about her work with Chris Dury and Doug Smith in coordinating some of our professional development programs specifically for community college leaders. We will talk about some of the applied work that we do in terms of the preparing community colleges to work with the growing Latinx population here in Iowa. And then there will be time for questions and conversation. As far as who we are, I know I see Doug in a little bubble. He is here, Dr. Doug Smith. Like I said, I'm Erin Doran. I'm an assistant professor. I've been at Iowa State for 5 years now. We have Dr. Jan Friedel, and then Chris Dury, who focuses a lot on leadership development. He's a former chancellor of Iowa Valley Community College District here in Iowa. And then Zoe, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, all. Zoë Thornton. I'm an assistant professor of practice, which we are actually going to talk about the practice part of my responsibility when we get to the outreach program. So happy to be with you all and share a bit about what our rockstar team is doing with community college leadership in Iowa.
Thank you. So who we are, we offer an array of graduate programs. So we offer a fully online MED program in higher education. Being fully online gives us the opportunity to really do a lot of outreach and to recruit a lot of community college students who live in Iowa, or some who may live in some of the adjacent states, but who aren't able to travel weekly to come to Iowa State on campus. We offer a hybrid EDD program in education that offers an emphasis in community college leadership, as well as our on-campus PhD program. The School of Education here at Iowa State also offers an Education for Social Justice graduate certificate, and we do have a lot of our community college practitioners who will take at least some of the classes that count toward the ESJ certificate, or will finish out the certificate as something extra or something additional that they do in addition to the MED program. I think that Education for Social Justice is a core value within the School of Education and really frames how we approach the work that we do. And in making sure that there are at least every class touches on at least some equity issues within community colleges. Conversations that we have all the time at CSCC are how community colleges just don't get enough love, enough funding, enough support, broadly defined. And so that's something that is part of ongoing conversations throughout our curriculum. We're also a land grant institution, and so we have connections to the community colleges, seeing education as a public good, as seeing it as something that helps uplift not only local communities, but the state of Iowa itself. And then what Zoe will talk about is also just part of a broader legacy that Iowa State has had in terms of community college research, yes, but also leadership preparation and professional development. So with that.
Thank you. So two of the key activities that our team engages in is this outreach programming in collaboration with our partners across the state around community college interests. And so we have two programs. These are non-credit outreach extension programs, if you will. Right now co-coordinated by myself and Krista Ree, but with great assistance from the rest of our CCLP team. Historically, though, these two programs have been around for some time. Both were designed in collaboration with community college presidents, but by a significant mentor for many of us, Dr. Larry Ebbers. The LINK program started in 1989 with a focus of diversifying the leadership in Iowa's community colleges. Specifically focused on women and persons of color. Since 1989, we've had 604 participants. So you can see that has had a tremendous impact, both in Iowa and of course beyond the state as our professionals and leaders move in and around both Iowa and the country. A follow-up program then was started a few years later as Dr. Ebbers was receiving some requests from leadership to, at that time, help develop men interested in leadership in community colleges. So that had an interesting focus. The CLIck program was started then in 1995. It has morphed, obviously, throughout the years to include everyone, not as a focus on men. And that program then has served 484 participants. Both programs over the years have modified and changed a bit as being responsive to the needs of the presidents and the trustees as they observed and those leadership gaps within our 15 community colleges in Iowa. And so as those things as those programs have changed, sometimes we had some interesting times when folks were saying, well, what exactly does that program do? And so our team in this recent year or two has taken a renewed focus to really study and find out what is needed, both locally and nationally. And so I want to give a shout out to Christine Kane, our graduate assistant, who I saw is on the webinar as well. She was also a key member of this team that over the past year and a half has looked at these two programs. So we have taken a very, again, intentional approach in collaborating among our program and the 15 community college presidents, as well as the trustees and the Iowa Department of Education and their Division of Community Colleges Workforce Preparation. Regardless of whom you talk to, whether it is a former participant or a current participant or one of the leaders or one of our collaborators, there are key things that everyone will say that they love about these two programs. And it is the networking, it is the campus visits, it is the exposure to new or different ways of doing things, best practices. And then it's the realization of the wide variety of roles and responsibilities and the collaboration that can happen within a college or across colleges and communities. So Erin, if you want to go to the next slide, I want to share a bit about how these programs look today. So of course, last year gave many of us an appreciative pause on some things and time to reevaluate. And so this is what our two programs look like today. The LINK program focuses on early to mid-career professionals and faculty in community colleges. We spend our time on foundational community college knowledge, and the leadership development that happens in that program is really focused on a lead from where you are approach. We encourage folks to not wait until they have a formal leadership role or a title to see themselves as leaders. And so we're talking about sphere of influence and such. So we know that at all levels within a community college system, leaders are needed, and we lead all in different ways and with different purposes. So we spend a lot of time on that. Both programs, of course, include those college visits and the statewide networking and best practices. The other program then, the former CLIck program, we've actually renamed this year, and lots of exciting things are happening in that. So we now have the Iowa Community College Leadership Institute, or ICCLI, and that is a renewed focus on mid to upper level leaders and aspiring senior leaders. We've heard from our presidents that we know there's a gap, but we've heard significant concern considering especially the impacts of the last 18 months and 2 years in folks being willing to raise their hand and say, I want to grow and develop and move into a senior executive level leadership role. And so, we spend our time in this program both on the advanced community college knowledge and issues, but also on leadership development and inspiring folks to raise their hand for those senior and executive level positions. So a key component that we've actually added into this program and why we renamed it this year is a mentoring component. And across the board, we've been very excited about this. We feel like we're still in the pilot stages, so we'll see how this year goes. It's definitely an organic process, and we've told all of our mentors, we're right here with you and we're accepting all feedback. But essentially that mentoring component requires the participant to have a mentor matched from their home college, ideally cabinet level. And so we've asked each college who nominates and sends a participant to match each participant with a mentor. We then provide some mentoring guidance, although in talking with all of our mentors already this year, very few need guidance. This is what they're excited, and they already do informal mentoring. And so they're excited for kind of this formal component. We've asked those mentor matches to design an individualized program. And so each of our participants in this program this year may have a different mentoring experience throughout the year. We've suggested things as informal as a monthly coffee chat to kind of debrief what the participant heard or received or engaged in that ICCLI session that month. It could be obviously relevant readings and webinars and such, but we've even suggested possible job shadowing, observing the president's monthly meetings, observing cabinet level meetings, observing state level meetings, engaged in maybe some key projects. So it really will depend on what the participants' goals are, as well as what the college's goals or future succession planning is and how that involves that participant. So we're hoping particularly that our small community colleges that do not have formal internal leadership development programs, or have not had time to pause and do succession planning, we're really hoping that this mentoring component helps add a bridge to that and helps develop internal processes, or at least awareness within the college systems as well. We've also then added, in response to the feedback that we've received from the presidents, single day academies. So we will be opening up a single day here and there throughout the year of this ICCLI program to have other leaders come in for these specific issues. One day will be spent on academic issues. We have an annual legislative issues session, and then a finance academy as well. So we're hoping to both broaden and deepen our reach and the professional development that we're providing. Just a note, I guess, as well, for both programs, the college leadership nominates and sends and provides then tuition for that participant to attend. We meet, each of the programs meets 5 times throughout the year for 2-day sessions each. And then we combine the 2 programs together in February for a legislative issues session. So that's a quick overview of what we're doing. I want to add that we launched both programs for this year last month, and already the evaluative feedback is coming back. Not only that the experience was great and it achieved the outcomes that we had for those sessions, but the anecdotal comments that they're including are noting that literally we had folks say, we really needed this. Thank you for being in person after this past 18 months. I need to refocus on my own leadership. So just some quick feedback I wanted to share. It's really exciting to be moving through that program again. Erin?
Yeah, I think some things that Zoe hasn't said that I'm going to brag on her about are one, this is a road show. This requires travel. So those campus visits mean that they will visit different parts of the state, upwards of 10 times a year for 2 days each. They will visit a significant portion of the community colleges like throughout the entire state of Iowa, which is really cool, but is a significant effort to do. Zoe alluded to the legislative session that is in February, which is a combined session. What is incredible about that is that Zoe and Chris in the past have organized it so that legislators are walking across the street to the hotel where the sessions, the CLIC and ICCLI sessions or links, and ICCLI sessions are happening, in order to speak directly to the participants, to be able to ask questions, to talk about what the priorities from the legislature are, like regarding community college policies. There's training that is provided from the Iowa Association of Community College Trustees within that session. They have had someone who was a reporter for the Des Moines Register who is able to provide an overview of the legislative session from that perspective, from a journalistic perspective. So it's just a very, very fun session and connects the dots for how the sausage is made in terms of community colleges here in Iowa. All right, so given that it is Latinx Heritage Month, still through the 15th, something that in thinking about the sessions, Zoe and Doug had said that they wanted me to be able to talk about some of the work that's going on at Iowa State University with regards to how we connect to the communities that we serve as a community college leadership program. And some data points that might surprise people, might not surprise people, depending on where you're coming from or how much you pay attention to demographic changes. Latinx Iowans are the largest racial ethnic minority, that should say minority group, in Iowa. Between 2000 and 2019, the Latino population increased 140%. And as of last year or 2 years ago, there was about 198,000 Latinx Iowans. That is projected to hit over 400,000 by 2050. So this is a significant portion of the population, especially considering that there's only about 3 million Iowans. So the joke is that there's more pigs than people here in Iowa. And something that I will say too is that we do have a couple of emerging HSIs, or Hispanic serving institutions. So the formal definition of a Hispanic serving institution is a college, a 2-year or 4-year not-for-profit institution that has a student body that is at least 25% Latinx at the undergraduate level. Excellencia in Education, which is an ed policy think tank out of DC, which tracks a lot of the policies and practices in HSIs, has come up with this category of emerging HSIs, or as a way to track those that may be on track to hit that 25% threshold. So emerging HSIs are ones that are 15 to 24.9% Latinx. And 2 of those colleges here in Iowa that are emerging HSIs are community colleges. So there's a Marshalltown Community College and Western Iowa Tech, which is over in Sioux City, right, Zoe? in far Western Iowa. So some of the things that I think about since I've been here is just one, for those of you who don't know me, I moved to Iowa from Texas. I am a native Texan, born and bred. The smallest, or how should I say, the most non-Latino place I've ever lived up until I lived in Iowa was San Antonio, which is still about half or majority Latinx. So coming here to a very white space and trying to figure out how am I going to import this research agenda and this advocacy work that I want to do on behalf of Latinx community college students. It's like, what are the challenges or what are the things that I have to think about? I think something that I will start with that has to be acknowledged is racism, and this can be overt or covert forms of racism. And one of the things that is striking is considering how large the Latinx population is here in the Midwest writ large. In many ways, it is rendered invisible. So folks may not be readily willing to acknowledge the incredible place that Latinos in the Midwest play in terms of the factories, in terms of agriculture. And how some of these Latinx communities are actually much older than most people, I think, realize. And so you have communities like Marshalltown or like Waterloo that may have second, third, fourth generation families who are living there. Folks who may be the descendants of migrant farm workers who settled permanently in the Midwest 100 years ago. And one of the things that I am hearing from some of the research that I've done with community college faculty members here in Iowa is that over the last couple of years, at least anecdotally, the numbers of Latinx students who are enrolling in the community college sector appears to have declined. Part of that was COVID, but even before that, the rhetoric and the just troublesome messaging that was coming out of the previous administration made it so that even if students themselves were documented, if they came from mixed status families where maybe they had relatives, their parents, grandparents, cousins, whoever, who were not documented, they feared that by filling out a college application, applying for financial aid, basically putting their name on any sort of official document might draw attention to them and to their family. And so in some ways, while nationally the Latinx enrollment numbers had been growing, at least anecdotally, some of the community college faculty members whom I've interviewed have talked about how there was a declining trend even before COVID. The COVID-19 pandemic, I mean, some data points that have come out of the National Clearinghouse, Student Clearinghouse over the last year have been really alarming in terms of pre-COVID, it was Latinx students that had been trending upwards in terms of enrollment numbers in the community colleges. And this fall 2020 data point that across the post-secondary education pipeline, Latinx college student enrollment rates had declined. That was alarming considering that reversed about 20 years worth of trends, if not more. And so there has to be a lot of hope that once we get back to normal, I use that in quotes because it feels like forever that we've been waiting to get back to normal. But we hope that the winding down of the COVID-19 pandemic, hopefully the settling of DACA of the DACA program once and for all will hopefully draw these students back. But some of the other things, when we get students either in our classes, in professional development or things like that here, I think that there is a genuine desire to want to help Latinx students in particular on their community college campuses. There's an awareness that there is a need to want to target these students, but there are some different challenges that practitioners face in implementing these changes. One is just deficit focused mindsets. I think in terms of thinking that Latinos might be too poor. There are systemic barriers that we as individuals can't change, such as Latinx students may be more likely to go to under-resourced high schools. They may not have had the same sort of access to dual enrollment programs, AP classes, a college-ready curriculum and things like that. But it's also about recognizing that there's potential in everyone. I think that that's something that community colleges try very, very hard to realize and to be very democratic in their thinking. But even the most well-intentioned community college faculty members that I've talked to here in Iowa might still, um, for example, think about, well, Latinx students haven't had the same sort of preparation in English, and that is a barrier to them succeeding in college. And I always think a really easy way to reframe that is like, yes, but imagine the potential of having a bilingual nurse, or being able to really foster a fully bilingual workforce who can navigate these spaces in between these predominantly Latinx communities and white power structures, for instance. There's always pressure to bring practices to scale in community colleges. We know that community colleges are underfunded. They have not received the same kind of funding that we would like to see here in Iowa as in many other places. And so the pressure becomes, are programs too niche? Are they they're not wide enough in scope to really impact the fabric of the college? Or just, again, like the pressure to bring certain practices to scale and high impact practices to scale. I think that in certain ways, there's also a certain amount of political risk for colleges to say that they're only going to implement programs that are for one specific program. And to go back to some of the racism, I mean, there have been some moments of very heightened anti-immigrant or anti-Latinx rhetoric here in the state of Iowa that I think have negatively impacted community colleges' ability to serve. And there are some systemic barriers for students to overcome. For example, in order to get a certified nurse's assistant's licensure here in the state of Iowa, one has to show proof of ID, of a government or state ID, something that if you are undocumented, you may not be able to show. There are barriers to receiving financial aid, again, related to documented or undocumented status. We have some students within our programs who have talked about working with their community college foundations to try to remove citizenship requirements for institutional financial aid, for instance, that are politically risky. Those are things that some boards or presidents may not be willing to implement, or if they are willing to implement it, they might not be willing to very widely advertise these sort of scholarships and things like that. So how do you get the message out to the students who could benefit from these kinds of resources if you're not able to really widely make it known that they're available? So through our programs, some of the things that we try to do and try to engage with, at the research level, I think in terms of Latinx students, that's kind of me, except my colleagues are enormously supportive in encouraging this, in making, helping form entree into research sites for me when possible. Things like that, but trying to do more research here. I'm a qualitative researcher, and COVID has not made data collection easy, especially in terms of me wanting to be able to go to some of these research sites. So hopefully, as more and more folks are vaccinated and feeling more comfortable and things are opening up, that can be something we can do. We've had some different mechanisms for engagement in the past. For example, I have given presentations on best practices for engaging Latinx students to click and link, and not quite yet ICCLI. But I think that we draw on each other's respective expertise when possible to either make sure that the right person is teaching the right classes, the person who has the expertise is teaching the right classes to these students, that we are disseminating the findings of our research to community college practitioners, and whether that be the faculty members, the presidents, the trustees, like, are we getting the research messaging out to the people who could benefit most to it? And I think that is part of the land grant mission, is in wanting to make sure that we are not doing research for research sake, and that we are not just staying in our ivory tower, so to speak, and not sharing out what we're finding. Through graduate education, which is again a staple of what we do here at Iowa State in terms of leadership preparation. Something that Zoe didn't mention is that even though ICCLI and CLIC may be, or LINK may be non-credit bearing for a lot of students, they do create important pipelines for us into our master's programs or into our PhD and EDD programs. So folks who maybe didn't realize that this is something that they could get a graduate degree in, that they could think about the next steps and what leadership means for them, both in terms, Zoe talked about succession planning, but it's also in talking about personal career development and how they plan for the future, and what sort of degree, knowledge, experience they need in order to advance in their own respective community college. And so we have built programs that are aligned with the AACC competencies, that help us think about what sort of findings Zoe and Doug had found in interviewing community college presidents on needs, and on doing a needs assessment from the perspective of the community college presidents. And then how can we in turn incorporate those into our graduate programs? But on top of that, there's also been opportunities for us to get creative. So for example, several years ago, I received a teaching grant from our college, the College of Human Sciences Dean's Office, in order to develop a course focused on Latinx students in higher education, with a focus on students in the Midwest. So everything that I sort of started out talking about these older Latino communities within the state of Iowa, or in just understanding the diversity of Latinx folks, and understanding how context shift or influence the experience of these. So I try really hard, for example, to get research and readings for this course that are not just based in Texas, California, and Florida. How do we find research that is based? So for example, a shout out to my colleagues over at the University of Nebraska Lincoln, Daryl Hatch and Elvira Abrica, who have written a beautiful article about the Latinx experience in the flyover states. So getting much more of that research in, and being able to teach students not only about the research and the stories that are out there, but then giving them the opportunity to apply that to practice. So a final culminating assignment in my Latinx students class is for them to come up with a program proposal that is based on research, based on high impact practices, but is modified to meet the needs and the context in which these students operate. And then again, the professional development, not only in just our in-house programs, but in encouraging our students to get involved with organizations like CSCC. So they can hear from, they can meet, they can potentially collaborate with the folks who are on the cutting edge of equity issues and of just the community college research writ large. So there's that. We wanted to be sure that we left time for questions, comments, and just overall conversation. So I'm gonna stop sharing this for a second. If folks want to drop any questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself or raise your hand or whatever, we're open.
I need to give a shout out. I see Sue Cater is on the webinar. We're bringing Dr. Cater to talk to ICCLI in December about governance. So we're really excited to have her, and that's one example of how we bring leverage expertise both within Iowa and outside of Iowa too. So,
Erin, I have a question.
Yes.
Linda Coates from Mississippi State. Your ICCLI sounds very, very interesting. About how many participants per year do you have?
hi, Linda. We have, between the two programs, we average anywhere from about 15 to 25. We thought that ICCLI being the, focusing on the mid to upper level, we would have fewer numbers, whereas the LINK program is entry to mid-level, but it's actually upside down this year. We have 24 in ICCLI, which also means that the colleges, they've been hugely receptive, continue to support that. And it also means that they had to find mentors for each one of those 24
Right.
participants. So it was kind of a big lift, but we were thrilled that that we had such a big response. So we'll see now if that affects the numbers next year, but we do try to keep those programs hovering no more than 25 because of all the networking, and we try to create an intimate, safe learning environment. It's a weird space in that it's not a conference, it's not a class, it's a program, and we hear the linkers and ICCLIers, they form this network that continues with them for years. And so it is a future support network as they move into their senior and executive level leadership roles too.
Okay, great. Good to see you again, Zoe.
Hey, Zoe and Erin, thanks for all the good information. This is Kate from UMGC. I really would love to hear more about this mentoring program. Like you mentioned, Zoe, this sounds like it's a new part of how you are revising the program. How are they vetted? How are they selected? What sort of support do you provide them? Or what expectations do they have? I see that as a really key way to connect all that they're learning in your program to practice. That's always the goal of our program. So just tell me more about it. Thanks.
Absolutely. No, thank you. That, like I say, this is an exciting part. So, it's new territory that we're wandering into with the mentoring component. As we vetted this with the community college presidents, it was all well received. We heard unanimously, yes, go forth and create this. We want you to add this. But we also heard a few cautionary questions in what is this going to look like? What's the burden on the mentor? So we for this first year, I pulled on some resources available. Michigan has a women in higher education mentoring program, and they have an extensive guide that I got my hands on and delineated way down. That their full program is all based on this mentoring structure. So I used that, and then we actually have one of our community colleges, the Eastern Iowa Community College, community colleges, 3 colleges in that district. They have a formal leadership development program, and they have a mentoring component with that. And so I utilized their lessons learned. They've had that in place, I think, for about 10 years. So I worked with that individual as well. And we wanted to create something that was formal for accountability on all parts, right? But yet flexible enough to meet the needs of both the mentee, the mentor, and the college, and again, also without being burdensome. And so we have a very, very simple template that outlines the months of the academic year. We note the ICCLI meetings for each month and the topics or themes that we're covering, the AACC competencies, so that then the mentor has that guide and can potentially plan activities around, or at least be prepared for conversations and questions around those monthly themes. And then we've given suggestions as to the types of activities. I think I shared, some of those: coffee hours, job shadowing, readings, meeting observations, that kind of thing. And then we also gave a list of potential topics for the mentor to cover, so that we made sure that it's not just about that college knowledge, right? It's not just about best practices or college policy. It's also the leadership component, and whether it be navigating internal cultures and policies, whether it be relationship building, partnership building with community partners, whether it be, where else do I find other professional development opportunities, that mentor's own leadership lessons learned. We're hoping that a relationship can be developed between that mentor mentee, so that after this formal year, they still have that person to kind of go to. As far as being vetted, we asked that the mentor not be the direct supervisor, which in some cases is a little bit difficult because the program is focused on mid to upper level leaders, right? And so inherently, we have a few supervisory mentors, and so we talk to them about making sure that you intentionally create that mentor time outside from your normal everyday engagement with that individual. And so that's one thing that we will be watching. We ask that the mentors at all possible be cabinet level. And so we have several presidents who are serving as mentors. We have several VPs who are serving as mentors, campus provosts. So we were very successful in that. The colleges really saw that connection. We left the mentor matching up to the individual colleges. So they know who and why they're sending to the program as a participant. They have their reasons why they're sending that individual. In many cases, we see advancement of our participants even during the year after the year of participation. So we can't tell them who to match with because we don't know their full reasons for sending the person into the program. And so we ask that they consider, why did you send this person? What is that future plan as you're thinking about it? Several then have consulted with the individuals themselves to say, what are your goals so we can make sure you have a good match. So again, it's kind of organic. Chris and I engaged in just a couple of conversations with a few of the colleges that reached out to say, hey, help me figure out how to match a good mentor with this person, and to see what our expectations were. But overall, it's really, we've made sure that it's at the college local level. We do not want to dictate that, who that is and what that looks like. It really needs to meet their local needs and their future planning. So we provide more guidance and support rather than strict guidelines on what to follow. So I hope that gives you a little bit more, Kate. I would love to see what my answer is after this first year and even after next year. But it's an exercise in flexibility and adventure, really. So
thanks, great info, appreciate it.
So thank you all very much for attending. If Raina doesn't mind, we can just stay on for a few more minutes if anybody has like a question that they didn't want to give out to the whole group. But thank you for attending. It was lovely spending some time with y'all, and hopefully we will be able to see each other in person in April for Tempe. And don't forget to submit conference proposals.
Yes, conference proposals, and also to nominate your colleagues and peers for awards. So check out the website, CSCC website, for more information. Thank you all for attending today.
Thank you for viewing this webinar in the 2021 CSCC webinar series. Please visit our website at cscconline.education.illinois.edu to learn more about the Council for the Study of Community Colleges.